Hebrews. This is video 2. This is Israel been Israel for the Israelite Brotherhood. This the Israelite Brotherhood. This the Israelite Brotherhood. All right, Hebrews. I was talking about, you know, how the Amorites took the land back from the Hebrews. We was tricked out the covenant, and how I established the fact that Jerusalem and the Amorites was in the land. Them five kings that I just finished reading about in Joshua. Well, when we got back to, when we got down to the book of Judges, this after Joshua had passed. This is around about 13, Judges is 1375 BC to 1075 BC. All right, and when we was going into the promised land after Joshua had died, we didn't keep the momentum to keep, taking the land. In the tribe of Judah, put some work in, but we let those Amorites and those other folks live in the land and become tributaries. You know what I'm saying? They became they paid tribute to us and did work, you see. And as you read Judges 1, it go into how we failed our mission, and them Amorites were still in the land. They were still in the land, see. And the Amorite forced the children of Dan into the mountains, for they would not suffer them to come down, but the Amorites would dwell in Mount Harris, Adjon, and Shabalim. Yet the hand of the house of Joseph prevailed, so they become tributaries. This is Judge 135, but it goes into how we didn't drive those folks out the land. The book of Judges. And then excuse me. Oh, praise be you, Almighty. All right, and then how those people were still in the land. That's like the word Gentile. The word Gentile is associated with them Amorites. Them Amorites, the Canaanites. The Canaanite kids were called Gentiles. And if you read Judges 4, it'll go into the Gentiles and the Amorites and Canaan kids. The unclean people were the original Gentiles, and we didn't drive those folks out the land. We didn't drive them out the land, and we had war with them. Joshua tell you about the war that we had with them, and it goes, into their history. And Judges go into the history of how we failed. But then, King Saul put his work in, and King David, put his work in. All right, this is what I want to show is these peoples right here is how the Amorites got their land back. This is how the Amorites got their land back. If you go to Second Kings, Israelite Brotherhood. If you go to Second Kings chapter 17, verse 24. Second Kings chapter 17, verse 24. You will see this was during the times that we were slipping on Egyptian worship. The northern kingdom had split from the southern kingdom, who chose to keep the temple and follow the creator in the laws that he gave prophet Moses. But the northern kingdom, after Solomon had died, see, I got it explained in one of the videos how Pharaoh kind of like slick tricked us when he gave Joseph, our forefather Joseph, Asenath. Asenath is the priest of On's daughter. Okay, out of that union come Manasseh and Ephraim. The tribe of Ephraim was big on Egyptian worship. The tribe of Ephraim was big on Egyptian worship. They relatives was the Egyptian. That's like when Solomon tried to get Jeroboam, and Jeroboam took off to Egypt and lived in Egypt until Solomon's death. Well, he was kicking it when his relatives was in control, the Mishwish tribes. What I'm saying? He was kicking it when his relatives was in control. And when Solomon died, Jeroboam come out of Egypt with 2 golden calves. And we had those 2 golden calves on us the whole time. We had those 2 golden calves on us the whole time until really King Josiah cleaned the whole land up of Egyptian worship, and he even made those Sepharvaims, the Sephardi Jews, whose real name is Sepharvaim, that's from Babylon, and they are tenant with Amorites. They are outright Amorites because they lived in Babylon before any other folks come there. The people from Sepharvaim, Sephar, the people from Sephar lived in Babylon and recorded Babylon's history, all its gods and all the history, Murdoch, Norigel, all its gods. So those people gonna be original Amorites, those Sepharvaims. Okay, if you go to 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 24, you will see that the king of Assyria placed some Sepharvaims, Sephardis in our land. Now this is in 722 BC. All right, chapter 17, verse 24. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cuthah and from Abel and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria. And then as you read, it'll tell you how they feared the Creator and followed our laws. You see, when you get down to 32, 17 verse 32, you see, so they feared the Elohim, but made unto themselves the lowest of them priests of the high places, who sacrificed for them in the houses of high places. And then they follow the ordinance unto this day. They do after the manner of their uh, uh, of their former's establishment. They fear not the Lord, neither do they after their statutes, after the ordinance of the law and the commandments which the Elohim commanded the children of Israel, whom he named Israel. Let me read this over. Unto this day they do after the former manner. They former things that they did in Babylon. That's going to be all those religions called the Kabbalah and all that extra stuff that's added to the Hebrew history. You see, they inherited our history, and then they start adding they say in they religious system to it, because they was responsible for writing Hebrews history after the Hebrews went into Africa in the book of Jeremiah. I got videos explaining how the exiles that went to Babylon that come back home was destroyed for mixing with those very same people, passing heritage on to them. That's what made the Greeks come into the land. And that's why come the fellow Jesus went to Egypt and hid in Egypt when the Greeks and the Romans and the white folks controlled it, because what none of them Hebrews, and with no Hebrew, no God's son praying no herd temple and call it his daddy house. See, that whole New Testament history and all that is hogwash, and it don't make no sense. It's because them Babylonian scribes had got a hold to it and wrote it. You see what I'm saying? See, the people from Sepharvaim were scribes. Those were Amorite scribes, and then they responsible for Babylon history. Okay, in 588 BC, in the book of Jeremiah, we abandoned our heritage to them, but they was well established in our culture. You see, if you go to 2 Kings 17, verse 41, you will see, so these nations feared the Elohim and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers, so do they unto this day. Okay, those people were Amorites. You see, Babylon was an Amorite nation, and them people coming from Babylon, kind of like Schlick got our heritage. You know what I'm saying? It's like the Babylonians got their heritage back. That's all it's saying, is that the Babylonians got their heritage back. The Amorites. Because when we went into Africa in the book of Jeremiah, we left everything to them people. All right. 2 Kings chapter 25, verse 26. This is during the Babylonian wars. And all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the armies arose and came to Egypt, for they were afraid of the Chaldeans. See, the Chaldeans were another branch of the Amorites, but these folks gonna have Scythians mixed with them too. So, the Scythian Ashkenazi code name in history is Scythian. They was all in Babylon. Everybody that plotted against us came from Babylon. Also, in Egypt had a correspondence with Babylon during our exodus during Moses' time and before. Babylon and Egypt was talking about us. You know what I'm saying? They knew what they had to deal with. Okay, now let's see. Let's go to the book of Jeremiah. The book of Jeremiah. This is the Israelite Brotherhood. This is the Israelite Brotherhood. All right, so let's go to the book of Jeremiah in 588 BC. Remember those Babylonian scribes, them Amorites was placed in our land in 722 BC. Okay, when you get to the book of Jeremiah, it record our sins, our last sins on the promised land. These are our last acts. The book of Jeremiah, around about 588 BC. The book of Ezekiel is when our troubles first started, and they took Ezekiel and them off. And that's gonna be the folks that's associated with Ezra, Nehemiah, Daniels, and Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. That's gonna be the history dealing with the exiles. But the book of Jeremiah is our last book. After they killed King Josiah, them Egyptians did, because he cleansed the land of Egyptian worship. You see, a lot of Hebrews don't know that the Egyptians had to do trade on the other side of the promised land. They had to get across us in order to do trade with their relatives in Mesopotamia and all those other peoples that was considered off branches of the Hamites. You see what I'm saying? And when we had that covenant, Egypt couldn't come across the promised land. It was like doom, and it was like doom in Egypt. It was like the death of Egypt, us having that covenant, because Joseph answered all Pharaoh dreams, and Pharaoh priests, or none of them couldn't answer nothing. And then Pharaoh was slick when he gave Joseph Asenath, and Asenath was the priest of On's daughter, and then it had Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh and Ephraim was big on the cattle worship. And we went back into Africa during the book of Jeremiah to worship that very same religion that Jeroboam had brought out on us, that we had did during our Exodus with Moses. Okay, if you go to chapter 44, this is our last days on the land, and this was a state of mind. This was a state of mind. The Babylonians had burnt the land up. A lot of prophecies had come true, in our last days. What the Creator had said, that how he was going to get us up off the land with fire and everything. Well, those folks from Babylon burnt the promised land up and chased us into Africa. All right. And this is what we said on our way into Africa. Chapter 44. This was a state of mind. And, I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to get to the most important verses. And we said, chapter 44, verse 15, 16, 17, and 18. Then all the men which knew that their wives had burnt incense unto other gods, and all the women stood by, a great multitude, even all the people that dwelt in Egypt and Pathros, answered Jeremiah, saying, As for the word that thou hast spoken unto us in the name of the Elohim, we will not hearken unto thee, but we will certainly do whatsoever thing go forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings, our princes, in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of food, and were well, and saw no evil. But since we left off to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, we have wanted all things, and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. And we took off into Africa, and we never returned. We never returned. That's like the book of Jeremiah. The book of Jeremiah is how we prove that we the Israelites. Because in the book of Jeremiah, the whole Hebrew nation said that they wasn't going to do the covenant no more, and that they was going into Africa to live and stay. Well, the Creator had already set the curses out of what would happen if we broke the covenant. The Creator even said we will break the covenant. It's a known fact. The Creator said we will break the covenant. That's in Deuteronomy 31. Okay. When we broke the covenant, we abandoned our heritage to those Sepharvaims. The word Sepharvaim is the Hebrew word for Sephardi. Sephardi covers Sephardim, Sephardic, and Sephardi. Those are the Sepharvaims. Those are the book writers that wrote the history for Babylon. That was Amorites that came back into the promised land after we abandoned the covenant and went into Africa. And that's why come the prophet Abraham was told the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full, because we didn't get rid of them when we came out of Egypt in Exodus with Moses. We befriended them and was suckered in and was tricked. You see what I'm saying? We was tricked. And we was tricked by everybody to get off that promised land, because the world couldn't sin and be in the conditions that it's in now if we hadn't broke the covenant. Us broken the covenant let all the sin loose. It let the wicked folks get everywhere. Well, anyway, when we went into Africa, in the book of Jeremiah, we abandoned our covenant to those people, as well as some more people, but they was all from Babylon. That's like if you go to Ezra, the book Ezra. All right. Message from the Israelite Brotherhood. This the Israelite Brotherhood. This the Israelite Brotherhood. This the Israelite Brotherhood. Everybody gonna be with this. We're gonna want everybody to play a part of the Israelite Brotherhood. You know, we got people in the Brotherhood, you probably ain't gonna never know who they is. You know, but this is what's going on. The Brotherhood bringing true history to our heritage. Okay, when you get to the book of Ezra, all right, you get to book to Ezra, and then you read Ezra 4, you will see Ezra 4 verse 9, you will see that, here goes some more people that was in our land. These people was in our land after the exiles come home, that 10th, that 1%, because the 99% had ran into Africa in the book of Jeremiah to worship the Egyptian religion. But here goes some of the enemies from Babylon that was in our land. All these folks tenant with Amorites right here. Then wrote Raum, the counselor, in Shimshi, the scribe, and the rest of their companions, the Danites, the Arshvasites, the Tarpelites, the Aphrasites, the Archivites, the Babylonians, the Shushanites, the Devites, and the Elamites. All those folks from Babylon. You know what I'm saying? They was writing and trying to get the exiles messed up that come home from Babylon. And when them folks be trying to say, oh, it's Jews in Babylon, the Jews was in Babylon and they wrote this and they had such a good time in Babylon. Don't be tricked by that. That was those Sepharvaims. That had been in our land since 722 BC. By the time the Babylonians, they kinfolks, them Amorites came and whooped us and chased us into Africa, they was free to roam. And a segment of them went to Babylon, and they was observing the exiles that was there. You see what I'm saying? They was observing the exiles, trying to see what would happen to them. Well, when them exiles come home and start mixing with them same people in the land, and we couldn't pass heritage off to them, the exiles was wiped out. And that's what the Greeks did. That's what the Greeks sent in. They were some professional killers, and they professionally got rid of them. And those Babylonian scribes that was in our land didn't record it. See, they was the only one recording history for the Hebrews after the book of Malachi. Malachi gonna be our last book around about 420 BC. You see, Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, those 5 prophets covered the exiles that came from Babylon. When the 99% ran into Africa in the book of Jeremiah in 588 BC, where the Persians whooped the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar and them, a sub branch of them Amorites. You know what I'm saying? They got whooped, and then the exiles come home. But this what prophet Jeremiah had said. If you go to Jeremiah, all right, let me see, Jeremiah 51. Shalom, this is finna close. Man, he said, leave Babylon, flee out of the midst of Babylon, deliver every man his soul, be not cut off in her iniquity, for the time of the Elohim's vengeance will render unto her recompense. So Babylon was destroyed, by the Persians, and those exiles got a chance to come home, and we had a list. Ezra and Nehemiah going to that list. But the Amorites got their land back When we went into Africa to worship the Egyptian religion, the Amorites got their land back. They took their heritage over. We was played all kind of ways, but the iniquity of the Amorites is full now because a whole nother system is finna come in this country that was created. The Westerners, the Westerners is another word for Amorite, and the Amorites got their heritage back. We were slick tricked, and when those Sephardis was placed in our land and inherited our heritage, it was like the Amorites